And there we are. Boy, that was a close call. I kid you not. I clicked the live button and a screen came up and goes, how have you enjoyed your experience? Are you ready to leave now? Haven't had an experience yet. How could I enjoy it? So, yeah, it's another Sunday. It's 1:00 my time. And I've rearranged things behind me a tiny little bit. I'm not 100% certain on that. Got some new stuff added to the set, including my good friend Mark in California sent me a KROQ Los Angeles bumper sticker. And KROQ is one of my favorite radio stations on earth. Listened to them a lot back in the law school days. Carl Lind, hola from the UP, or hola. Thank you very much. Thanks for checking in. I saw JP checking a minute ago, and I've got to give him a shout out. JP sent me a postcard from overseas. Hey, Steve, enjoying the UK. Lots to see. Wadworth is the last brewery in the UK that still delivers beer with horses and a carriage. JP. Wadworth and Company since 1875. And that is a majestic looking horse pulling the beer to the thirsty customers. Thrift Store Hacker, KROQ, home of the late Don Imus. If he was there, it would be a long time ago. But KROQ went through some earlier phases and became playing new music in the 1980s. And that's when they most became world famous, K-Rock. And then JRH passed this along to me, and it's mailed to me as a postcard, and it says, came across this pic online, King Richard 1970, looks like Riverside, California. And that, of course, is the Superbird, identical to that one there. I've ridden in this car, and that is, in fact, at Riverside. Riverside, of course, was the road course that was part of the NASCAR circuit in the late 60s, early 70s. And you can always tell these cars are at Riverside because, number one, they're going the wrong direction. And by that, I mean, you'll notice that the gas cap is on the passenger side. And most NASCAR tracks, you come in and the gas tank is on the driver's side. So, you know, you don't want them to have to think about which side they pull up to get gas in a NASCAR race. There you go. KO says, I was more of a KNAC listener over KROQ. KNAC was another well-known station. I believe they're broadcasting out of Long Beach. KNAC was a good station also. Los Angeles has and had, back when I was in law school, but for many, many years, one of the greatest radio markets there ever was. I know at one point they had 7 or 8 morning shows. There were $1 million morning shows. And you could just flip around the dial and just, you know, good music, good stuff. I mean, that's, you know, that was the pinnacle of radio. I never worked in Los Angeles radio, but I listened to it quite a bit. Alex checking in from Portland, Oregon. Thanks for checking in, my friend. Don Leitz. Hey, Steve, and everyone from Milwaukee. Steve Stalock, how can you hold a live chat with a Red Wings game on? Have you no respect? You know, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. But, you know, the problem with the hockey season is that pretty much it runs almost year round. So there's pretty much always a hockey game on. And I admit I've lost track. I haven't been watching that much Red Wings hockey recently. So that's, you know, I admit I'm lacking there. Wild Bill 50 set up my phone to give me a LA law alarm so I wouldn't miss the live. I assume you mean Leto's law alarm. There you go. Hey, Steve, do you watch Roadkill on Motor Trend? Thrift Store Hacker asks. Great fun car show, lots of Mopar. I watch them from time to time. I haven't been catching as much stuff on some of those off channels. I actually caught up on Graveyard Cars again last night for a little while. Mark Warman and the boys are always rebuilding these beautiful Mopars, Daytonas, Superbirds, Chargers, Cudas, Challengers. And the guy does very, very good work. And in fact, there's an episode of Graveyard Cars where you'll see one of them flipping through my book on camera. Gotta love that. So Frank Kajowski says, the sound seems off to me. Does anyone else hear it? I would like to know a little bit more what you mean by off. And I'm only asking because nothing's changed. Nothing ever changes. I've changed the background a little bit, and I moved the microphone 2 inches. Other than that, nothing has changed. It's still plugged in. It's running through the webcaster. So what can I tell you? People ask me from time to time about the fun meter. It's not a tachometer. And yes, it's a fun meter and it's pegged. So that was sent to me, I believe, by Kurt in Colorado. I believe I got a whole package of stuff from him and his wife. And that was in there and it went right onto the set. In case you're curious, this is a Haro shirt, Haro. Haro is the brand of mountain bike I ride. They're not an advertiser. I just love their stuff. I've owned 3 Haro mountain bikes, I believe. And I try to wreck them and I can't. So, I was wondering why I wasn't refreshing. I actually hit the wrong, hit the wrong thing over here. Mike D, the audio has a slight shift from the video. Yeah, I can't control that. I'm sure it has more to do with the internet of things. So there you go. Too much sugar. Audio seems fine. It probably does because you probably had too much sugar. And by the way, today I'm drinking. It's Gatorade. That's why it's blue. I purposely picked colored Gatorade so you won't think I'm drinking something else. I'm wondering if that's visible there, but you'll see that the etching on the glass is the Keweenaw Adventure Company. The Keweenaw Adventure Company is a business in Copper Harbor, Michigan that rents things such as mountain bikes, kayaks, and other fun stuff in Copper Harbor, Michigan. And whenever I go up there, I drop in and see my friend Sam Raymond, who owns the place. And I love anybody who runs a business in the Upper Peninsula because it's tough sledding at times. But he manages to do it and has some good time. So, thrift store hacker Steve got Haro money. I barely get Huffy money. Now, you know something? I wear so many shirts on the show, and I want to make sure the shirts don't get skewed too far away from me. So every now and then, I'll tell you right now, this was not sent to me. This is one that I bought myself, and I do occasionally, buy myself. I love T-shirts. I'm a little angry at myself. It didn't occur to me earlier that I could wear T-shirts on camera. I used to actually go to my closet and grab a shirt with buttons and collars and stuff. Somebody commented on a video of mine this morning and said, "Hey, Steve, what's wrong with you?" And I'm reading the comment out of context. I'm like, "What?" And I looked and I realized that they're watching a video of me that's 2 years old, and I'm wearing a shirt and I'm in front of a different set. And they're like, I mean, it's a similar set. Some of it was there, but not all of it. They go, your set got uncluttered and you're not wearing a T-shirt. What's up with that? So Dixie Champagne says, good afternoon from the land of Coca-Cola. I assume you mean Georgia, where Coca-Cola was invented and founded and became the thing it is. Tough sledding, Wild Bill 57, pardon the pun. Yeah, although they got a lot of snow up north right now, so I suspect the sledding is good. Nothing better to do than watch YouTube asks, did you ever get your YouTube plaque for getting 100,000 subs? No, I did not. And that's actually something that there's some controversy about because not everyone gets one. And many people get them, but you can't demand it or ask for it. It's something that they offer you. And so if you do the research, it says once you hit 100,000, YouTube might contact you and give you the code where you can order it. They never contacted me. Or if they did, it went into my garbage. I don't know. But I never got a contact. So, if I had one, I'd display it. Haven't got one. JP points out that Coke is in Atlanta. Yes, it is. Yes, I said Georgia. I wasn't, I'm trying to be as inclusive as I can. The Maze Sun says, are we seeing a mirror image? I hope not. I did move a couple things around. I put the Finnish license plate on this side, and I put the 2 cars over on this side. And there's a reason for that. And partly it was because the way the shadows were coming off these 2 big radio tubes is kind of bumming me out. I just realized now I've got to move that. There we go. So it's always a work in progress. Betty Anderson, what's your dream adrenaline vacation as opposed to just a regular vacation? I'm not sure. I can tell you right now that I've been watching a lot of videos on YouTube when I ride my Peloton, and I do ride my Peloton every single day. If you're on Peloton, friend me, I'm Milo Wolfie, but hard to forget that one, right? If you're so on Peloton, I have my Peloton set up in such a way that there's a computer on a desk in front of me about 5 feet away. And so if I want to, I can turn the Peloton on and be riding and watch what's on my desk computer on that desk. And so what I often do is I'll pull up videos of stuff that I want to watch while I'm biking because I like to get my mind off the fact I'm exercising. And so what I've been doing lately is I've been putting up these guys who they do these races down the side of glaciers, like in the Alps. And the races are like a half hour long, which is perfect because I ride for half an hour. So guys will have the GoPro cameras on their heads and they'll ride. And these are being shot in real time, no edits. You don't know if the guy's going to win, come in 15th place, if he's going to crash or crash repeatedly. I saw a guy who was filming and, all of a sudden the camera goes, hits the ground as he hits a patch of snow. But to me, it's a lot of fun. So if you say about an adrenaline vacation, I can see myself going to one of those places, not to compete. I wouldn't want to. It's not. I'm not scared of going fast. I'm scared of going fast next to somebody who doesn't care about my health. And so you have some guy pass you and cut you off and crash you, and I don't want to do that. So that to me would be a lot of fun. Would be to go mountain biking like in the Alps or something. But I'm not a crazy thrill seeker in that sense. I got too much stuff to do that requires me to actually be healthy. Mike Geertz, I still have to buy a Peloton. There you go. Richard Benjamin, my first choice would not be a luxury ocean cruise. Here's the deal. I've been on cruises. I've done several cruises. I don't think I've mentioned that before, but I've actually been on probably 5 or 6 cruises. And cruising is a whole different thing. I've also traveled. I've been to England and France and Switzerland, where I just flew over and just got around. But if you want to visit a bunch of places and kind of have someone else do the logistics for you, a cruise is not a bad way of doing it. So you want to study and get to know the Caribbean islands. You can take a cruise where you get on a boat in Miami and you cruise and you go to an island. You're there all day. You come back, you sleep, you wake up, and you're in another island. And you do this with different islands. But the cruises are also filled with all kinds of people because they're generally jam-packed. So, it depends on how much you like meeting people, as we say. It's true that there are often all-you-can-eat buffets 24 hours a day. That tends to also attract a certain kind of people, again, how much you like people. And then even a decently priced room will still have you sleeping in a bed that's like this, and the walls are right here. And it's not a big hotel room, okay? It's a small room on a gigantic boat. But if so I've taken cruises and I've visited a bunch of islands, and what I saw on the islands is great. Walking around the deck might be okay, but you don't want to spend any time in your cabin other than sleeping because it's so claustrophobic. So right now, though, with all the viruses and so on going on, you just spent all this time on a cruise ship. You pull into a port and they say, oh, by the way, we're going to quarantine you for 2 weeks. That right there, my friends, is a nightmare. Because remember what I said about how small the cabins are. Okay. You don't want to go mingle with people on a quarantined boat. Where are you going to go? You're going to go sit in your tiny little shoebox and hope that you don't die. So that's the situation currently right now. Richard Stoll says the Coca-Cola house is in Valdosta, Georgia, not Atlanta. Yes, I wasn't sure. I know Coca-Cola is headquartered in Atlanta. Wasn't sure if that was where they were actually originated from. A Google user asks about Art Van Furniture filing for bankruptcy. I'd not heard that. I know they got bought not too long ago. There's at least talk of that before. So Stephen Baines is curious to know if I'm wearing pants, and he has a rhyme that reason he's asked. So just for your benefit, blue jeans today. Just so you know. Doug Jones, why don't police take money from armored trucks that may have picked up money from stores that people spending may have gotten from the drug sales or money laundering? That's not a bad question. People have said, if you think about it, a lot of legitimate businesses use banks to launder their money. Why not just seize the money from the armored trucks and make the banks sue to get their money back? And of course, that's the problem, is that the banks have got the money to litigate that. They'd rather go against people who haven't got the money to litigate. That's why they choose the people they choose to steal the money from. Bob Summers, have you ever been recognized in public from YouTube? No, I have not. Now, I can tell you that last year's Woodward Dream Cruise, I announced that I'd be at the Dream Cruise, and I tweeted some information, and 3 people found me. But 4 or 5 told me they tried. They were there. They just couldn't get to my end because I was up at the north end and they're at the south end, and that can take you several hours to get there. I am going to be at this year's Woodward Dream Cruise. I hope to have a car there. So I will give you updates on that as well. But my point simply being that I've never been recognized from YouTube, but I did actually once get recognized from a book I had written in a Houghton, Michigan, up in the Upper Peninsula. I was eating breakfast at a Perkins restaurant. And the waitress said, "Are you Steve Leto?" And I said, "Yeah, how on earth could you know that?" She goes, "I just read your book." So that's pretty cool. The one and only time that that's happened that I can think of. So Multi-Clojo, greetings from Belgium. There you go, my friend. Thanks for checking in. I love it when people check in from overseas. Dylan, going to bring the Viper. If I've got it, I'll bring it. That's I hate to talk about the future for fear of jinxing myself. And if things play out right, though, I would like to have a Viper by the Dream Cruise, which is usually the third weekend in August. So if I have one, I'll bring it and I'll let it out where I am, and I'll probably give something away. Last time I brought a thing of Lemon Law Bibles with me, and I said, "Hey, if you want a copy of the book, come on over, say hi, shake my hand, and you get a free book." So we'll give out something. Paul Reiter, my dad and brother's business gets a lot of business from people in minivans running the street rods and classics at Woodward. Yeah, it's kind of funny. The Woodward Dream Cruise basically engulfs a stretch of Woodward Avenue between about, say, 8 Mile and Pontiac, which I'm guessing is about 10 miles, 15 miles long from end to end. And it's packed bumper to bumper. And so people who live in the area don't like it because it causes congestion and noise and so on. But I know people who have businesses out there, and some of them just shut down. They say, "I'm not even going to deal with it." And some of them actually just try to embrace it and do what they can. My friends at Pasteiners, which is a bookstore / automotive memorabilia shop just north of 14 on the east side, they embrace it because the foot traffic is just huge for them. So they're one of the stores, obviously, that's raking it in. I suspect most of the restaurants on the stretch are also killing it. I know that there's a couple pizza places like Little Caesars where they'll just literally have one of their workers stand at the curb with a stack of boxed, pizzas, so $5 a pizza, just boom, 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 handing out pizzas to people driving by. I will admit to one year being in traffic and seeing that guy and scrambling to see if I could scrounge up $5 before I passed him. And I managed to do it. So there you go. Araelt, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, says currently at Wayne State, so might make it to the cruise. Wayne State, of course, is one of the universities in Detroit proper. And I've got friends who go there. One of my good friends has 1 or 2 children there right now, adults, but kids. And Wayne State is a very, very good school, very, very good urban school. And very, very well known. They've got a law school, of course, and I believe they've got some other schools as well. So 24 Vignette says you cannot mention Coke without saying that Dr. Pepper is from Waco, Texas, home of the Baylor Bears. I knew Dr. Pepper was from Texas. I learned that watching American Pickers. The guys from American Pickers stopped by, I believe it was the Dr. Pepper headquarters, and we're going through their archives, buying things they had extras of so that they could raise some money for something. But there you go. 5153 Flash, how much money do you make from YouTube? That's like asking somebody how much they weigh. Hoping to bring my 76 Trans Am 455 4-speed car, Steve Edgar. Yeah, those are the days, my friend. There's several generations of Trans Ams, and I'm guessing the 76 would be the same generation as the Smoky and the Bandit Trans Am. I'm not sure the exact year of that one, but a very good friend of mine who comes every single year, and it's usually near where I hang out, has a 73 Trans Am, and I like that generation as well, the earlier one. So Fred Corrado says, is that where they section off a section of road for drag racing? Yeah, the roadkill guys. Somebody mentioned earlier, and I talked about it briefly. The roadkill guys have a deal with, I believe, Chrysler, FCA, and they actually got the city of Pontiac to sanction this. And they take Woodward Avenue, which is several lanes wide at that northern end there, and they block off two sections, and they put those temporary concrete dividers down one side, and they put grandstands down the other. And they basically invite anybody who wants to come out there and just drag race on that strip of road there. And so it's legal for one evening. If you can get in line and do the run, it's legal for you to drag race on Woodward Avenue. I've known other people who drag raced on Woodward Avenue, and any other time, generally speaking, it would be considered a crime. It's actually a misdemeanor 6-point offense for which you can go to jail and be fined $500. And I can tell you that because I have represented people who got tickets for drag racing. 10th man, Steve Leto, respect for you, Leto. Jeff is here. Audits is who got me involved. You are the reason I do the legal research before I do anything. It's good. You know, nowadays, it's so easy to do research. You do have to kind of poke around a little bit, but you can figure out questions to almost anything, answers to almost any questions these days. And so when it's a little frustrating because once in a while someone will ask a comment in the comment section under video and ask a question that's really easy to figure out. You know, like what year was Roe versus Wade? I mean, you can just Google it and find it in 30 seconds. Now, when it comes to a bigger question like do you need a driver's license to drive, you're going to get a bunch of noise you've got to dig through. But if it's simply a fact, like, you know, I want to know, you know, where was Gilligan's Island filmed? Okay. You can find the answer to that in 30 seconds with photographs and modern maps. So nowadays, the stuff you can figure out is very easy to do. And you should do some research because I've had people who make comments or send me emails and they'll ask me a question. And don't get me wrong, I encourage people to ask me questions, but they'll ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, and I just Google it and I double check, make sure I'm right. And I send it back and they go, oh, thank you. And I'm like, you could have done that yourself, but what are you gonna do? Richard Benjamin says, in some states, the legal term is exhibition of speed. What is it in Michigan for drag racing? Well, here's the difference. Drag racing implies another participant. Exhibition of speed, not necessarily. And so some states will actually say exhibition of speed is somebody, I'm just there by myself and I stomp on the gas and I launch my car. I've seen that listed in states as being like an unsafe acceleration, but sometimes they'll just call it careless or reckless driving. They'll just say, yeah, you were careless or reckless. But drag racing implies that there's someone you are racing against. And that's one of the questions I always ask people. And I'll admit, I've only had 4 or 5 people call me, but they'll say, Steve, I got a ticket for drag racing. And I always ask, did they ticket the other guy? Because as you can imagine, if they did, it's going to be a much better case for the cops because they say, we got them both. But if they pulled one guy over for drag racing, the question is, who is he racing against? But yeah, it's going to vary from state to state. Happy Sunday, all, Fred Stewart. And to you, my friend. Richard Benjamin, I just saw a YouTube video recently from many of the filming locations of TV shows, and Gilligan's Island is one of them. I think that might be what stuck that in my head. I was actually flipping through YouTube, and YouTube's got those algorithms that somehow figure out what it is that you might want to see, and they'll surprise you because it'll be something you've never seen before, and you go, that makes sense. So the other day I'm flipping around, and it goes, would you like to watch this video? And it's like, the location where Hogan's Heroes was shot. Now, I watched Hogan's Heroes as a kid, and it's in reruns right now, right after Green Acres on a channel that I watch. And I'm telling you this because I do, in fact, watch Green Acres. Why wouldn't I? The man is an attorney, although he's working the old Ziffel place, or he's in the old Haney place. And so I'm watching it. It's kind of strange because they have photographs of the lot where it was shot back in the 60s, aerial photographs and then ground shots. And they superimpose it over what's there today. And today, there's buildings have been built on the spot. But it's kind of funny because, you know, there used to be a fence and there's houses right here. And they're shooting a Hogan's Heroes like 50 feet away. And those houses are still there. And I don't know why I find that fascinating, because if you watch Hogan's Heroes, they show you in the video how all the shots were shot basically looking two different directions, because over here was something else and back here was a parking lot. And so there was times like when, Hogan and the men line up in front of the barracks, and if the camera had done a 180, there's all the cars that belong to all the actors parked right there, and the crew. So it's just, I don't know why I found that fascinating. So and the guy did a ton of research to show you, here's the photograph at the time, here it's overlaid to the photograph now, and so on. So the guy's right. So, Stephen Baines, in Arizona, we have a law called wasting finite resources. The officer is feeling nice, they can give you that instead of a speeding ticket. Could I fight it since I have a Tesla? They're going to argue that whatever goes into the electricity to make the Tesla is also finite. In Michigan, the common one they give you is impeding traffic or blockading traffic, depending on if it's a city ticket or a state or county. And impeding traffic is considered a non-moving violation. And it's kind of like if you had your car out in traffic and you simply didn't get out of the way and you're causing a jam up. It's not parking. It's a step above that. But impeding traffic is a 0-point offense. So they'll often say, hey, look, I could write you up for 5 over, 1 or 2 points, or 10 over, whatever. I'm going to give you the impeding traffic. It's no points. Just pay it. And people call me and say, Steve, can you get me out of an impeding traffic ticket? I say, what do you think I can bargain that down to? It's already the bottom of the menu, So there you go. Wilma or Betty? Tony Turtle. I was just talking to somebody about the Flintstones, and I find it hard to believe that the Flintstones used to be broadcast primetime network TV with huge numbers, and one of the highest rated TV shows of all time was the episode where Bam Bam was born. And the idea that all across America, families stopped what they're doing to all sit in front of a TV set and go, wow, I hope this birth goes okay, of a comic book character, cartoon character. I don't know. And I've tried watching it, and the quality of the animation now is so bad. I mean, it's just so. Wayne Jensen, thanks, Steve. I'm now addicted to looking for the $100 bill in all of your videos. Let me think where it is right now. Is it? I'm trying to remember. I usually do move it. Oh, there we go. I usually do move it before I shoot anything. But I don't want to give it away. JP points out the Flintstones was the cartoon version of the Honeymooners. Yeah, pretty much. Many people have pointed out that there was the parallel there. Racing Jason 99, Thelma or Daphne? You know what's funny is I was never a Scooby-Doo watcher, and I think it has to do with my age. I think that came along right behind me, so I didn't actually spend much time watching Scooby-Doo. I get the references, but other than that, I don't. Dave K. Steve, back in the late 1960s, a lot of the movies that featured drag racing were actually filmed in Detroit on Woodward Avenue. I'm not sure about which ones those would be. I'd be curious, but I can tell you that Woodward Avenue had a national reputation. They actually, I believe it was a Pontiac ad for GTO. I've mentioned this before. They shot a photograph of a GTO pulling a turnaround on Woodward Avenue in front of a sign that said Woodward Avenue. And they got in trouble, not trouble, but they got chastised by, the fun police who said, oh, you're encouraging drag racing by showing a GTO in front of a sign that says Woodward Avenue. And it's like, who are you, the thought police? So do you know which Simpsons character you laugh like? I'm not sure, but I like them all. So I won't be insulted by anything you say, Aaron H., but thank you for asking. Josie and the Pussycats, again, after my time, as they say. RC Mania. Hi, Steve. How are you today? What's the main topic? Well, we don't have one, but I'll mention to you that last week I did do the story about the drones in Genesee County. The Genesee County Parks Department had started issuing rules about drones, despite the fact that the state of Michigan specifically said that local municipalities cannot regulate drones. And so they arrested a guy flying a drone over a park in Genesee County, And he filed a lawsuit, and a very, very wise judge in Genesee Circuit Court said, you can't do that, and struck it down. So a lot of people applauded that ruling, and it's going to continue to be a controversial thing until they start really, making these things very, very uniform across the country. Michael Mullis, Telegraph Road does too. Never raced on Woodward. Yeah, actually in Michigan, Southeast Michigan, there was the three: Telegraph, Woodward, and Gratiot. And so you'd always hear these rumors that, hey, there's some guys out in Gratiot who've got a hot car, some guys over on Telegraph. But Woodward was the one that I grew up literally half a mile from Woodward Avenue where I grew up. So I'm most familiar with that. But there were sections of Gratiot that were known for cruising and sections of Telegraph. And I know that there are guys out there who actually talk about, the heritage of racing on one or the other. See what else you got here. Brad Long, yes, just a heads up, ladies, I am single. And by the way, I don't know we got a lot of ladies in the room, but we will let everyone know that that's what's happening. Aaron H says, I laugh like Dr. Hibbert. Which is, I'll take that, because Dr. Hibbert is known for his laugh. Now, he tends to laugh at inappropriate times. Okay, like we don't know where your kidney is. But he's a lovable character who's always been on the show. My favorite Dr. Hibbert moment is in the episode where Homer discovers that he's got a crayon lodged in his brain that's made him stupid all these years. And he goes to a doctor, Dr. Hibbert, and Dr. Hibbert looks at the x-ray, and there's clearly a crayon jammed in Homer's brain, right? Like he put it up his nose and went into his brain as a small child. And Dr. Hibbert goes, well, the reason I've never noticed the crayon is because my thumb just happens to go over the spot, and I always hold the x-rays the same way. So they remove the crayon. Homer becomes a super genius, realizes he's not happy, goes back to Moe's and has Moe stick the crayon back up his nose. But I like Dr. Hibbert. Stuart Thompson, give Steve a thumbs up. 47 out of 300 is pathetic. Well, here's a couple things. Number one, we've got 73 thumbs ups now, according to my math. We got 419 people in the room, but I never ask anybody to do anything. Just come on. Just your presence here makes me happy. Sal Luna. Hi, Dr. Nick. Dr. Nick, of course, is the other doctor on The Simpsons who is famous for being a bumbling person who probably doesn't have the qualifications of Dr. Hibbert. But, there you go. Chris Chaos, to ever go to the IndyCar races on Belle Isle? No, I have not. And I'll tell you, I've run on Belle Isle every year at the marathon, and we run the portion where much of that's run. And it's kind of funny. You're running on this, very, very wide concrete or blacktop pavement. But on the concrete portions, there's these burnout marks. And if you didn't know they did a race out there, you'd think that people are goofing off. But it's burnouts from all the Indy cars or the F1 cars. They've raced Formula cars out there before as well. But my favorite Formula Detroit story is that for a little while, they ran the Grand Prix type cars on the streets of Detroit. And they actually laid out a course in Detroit and tried to turn Detroit into like one of these European countries that actually run races on the streets, like Monte Carlo or something. And somebody asked one of the drivers when they were running, I think in Las Vegas, and they said, hey, we've heard some complaints that the course is kind of a mess. What are your thoughts? And he goes, hey, we survived Detroit. We'll be okay here. Because the Detroit streets are so bad. And then what they did is they moved the race out onto Belle Isle, which is an island park. And some very, very wealthy people in the community, I think Penske may have gotten involved, but some very, very wealthy people got together and say, look, let's turn this into a showcase. We're going to use a portion of the park, but we will clean it up. We'll make it racing condition. We'll bring in everything we need, including grandstands and all that stuff. And they run races out there. Never got out to see them, but I've watched them on TV. I also did more than once go out and watch the hydroplane races. Every year they do hydroplane races on the Detroit River, and these are the unlimited boats that run turbine engines. Really, really cool. Really, really loud. And I remember back in the day going out there and watching like Chip Hanauer and Bill Munsey and the old school guys. And the saddest part of all is that most of those guys passed away. I don't know about Chip Hanauer, but I know Bill Munsey did while racing boats. I mean, it was one of those things where it's kind of like being a fighter pilot during World War II, depending which side you're on. The numbers are just against you, and these guys are racing these boats. And I remember the year in particular I'm thinking of, the water was really, really bad. And I remember one heat had 3 boats flip. And, those guys are in boats. They've got a cockpit around them, like the cockpit out of a fighter jet. But when a boat flips upside down, the guy's stuck in there. I mean, number one, they got to get him out. And all these guys got out. But man, just the idea about going that speed, and you see these things start tumbling and slamming into the water, and it's it doesn't look like a fun ride. So, Michael Mullis, we hydroplaned on the Southfield Freeway. I'm sure you did, especially if you go down and get on the Lodge Freeway, where it's one of those sunken underground. It's sunken down below grade quite a bit. Every time it rains, it floods. And you get these people who, hey, I drove through yesterday. What's the difference today? And they drive through. Next thing you know, they're standing on the roof of their car calling for help. Sub GR77 mentions who killed the electric car. Long story. Yeah, there's actually a couple good documentaries about that. General Motors came out with the EV1 a few years ago. And if you go on the internet, you can find pictures of them all right now. They're all crushed and stacked up out in the desert someplace. But it's a pretty cool car, but it's way ahead of its time in many respects. 101 Saber says Chip is still around, referring to Chip Hanauer. I hope so. Good guy. I believe when I saw him, the big boats that he was involved in, Bill Munsey was always Atlas Van Lines. And I believe Chip was on the Miss US 1 or 2 years, which was owned by U.S. Steel, I believe, or sponsored by, and also Miss Budweiser. Budweiser poured a ton of money into the into those boats. Bugleman, have you been to the Belle Isle Aquarium? Not since I was a little kid. There's an aquarium on Belle Isle. It's famous because, among other things, it has an electric eel. As a child, there's nothing more fascinating than an electric eel. I don't know why. I've been to Detroit Zoo lately, though. The Detroit Zoo is pretty cool. So, Bob A. Bong, I knew Chip. He drove the Miss Pan Pack, I think. Well, I'm sure he may have. You got to remember that there's a couple different boats out there that have been around for years, and the sponsorship changes. I don't even know if Atlas Van Lines is still in unlimited hydroplanes. But Pan Pack was one of the ones that I often heard about. There's also like Oh Boy Oberto and a couple others. And my oldest brother Ken, is an engineer, and he's fascinated, as am I, by things that are loud and fast and powerful, and so the hydroplane technology is amazing. And there were, somebody else mentioned, there were piston-driven boats. Richard Stoll points out. And what's interesting about the piston-driven boats is that many of them ran Allison aircraft engines. The World War II 12-cylinder engines that they put in things like the P-51 Mustang. And they put those in boats, which is pretty interesting, and they were loud. And if you're interested in that kind of stuff, be sure to check out Jay Leno's garage, because he has a car that he put an Allison aircraft engine into. He has a couple, I think. And when I was at his garage, I saw one of them, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I got an airplane engine." And he said, "Oh, you know about that?" We had a long discussion about that. But, you want to put too much horsepower into a car, a V12 is the way to go. So, Richard Stoley says, I much preferred the piston-driven boats, and the zoo is in Royal Oak. Yes, it is. And that's something, and this is the kind of trivia, I don't know if it matters much to people outside the area, but the Detroit Zoo is in Royal Oak, Michigan. And if you're driving up Woodward Avenue, the border of Detroit ends, in essence, at 8 Mile Road. And there is a big zoological park at 11 Mile and Woodward, which is the Detroit Zoo. And the Detroit Zoo has been there for eons, and it was, put there and founded by Detroit, but it is, in fact, within the boundaries of Royal Oak. So it's kind of interesting. A few years ago, there's a water tower there that says Detroit Zoo on the side, around the side. A few years ago, the mayor, Coleman Young, put his name on the water tower. And it says, Detroit Zoo Mayor, Coleman Young, Detroit Mayor. And I know since then a few other mayors have done that also. But I know that it irked a few people who are like, why is there a water tower in Royal Oak that says Detroit Mayor, Coleman Young? But, what are you going to do? Bob, don't forget today is the great American race, the Daytona 500. Oh, I'll have to check that out. I'm not as interested in NASCAR these days as I used to be, simply because stock car racing, we've gone over this before, they aren't racing stock cars anymore, and it's basically a big circus. And they keep trying to introduce rules to make it more interesting to young viewers. And I think they're losing sight of the fact that people want to see a race in cars that look like cars to some extent, and drivers that look like us to some extent, or to whoever the viewer might be. And the idea that we're going to fix racing by introducing new rules and new aero packages and have a playoff system. And it's like, what? The next thing they're going to go to, and with my luck, they've already done it, so please, somebody correct me. But do they have instant replay in NASCAR yet? Because every sport now has instant replay. And when they brought instant replay to baseball, I said to myself, it's all over. It's all over. Because the last thing you need in baseball is a lengthy appellate process to slow it down. Saluda. Left. Oh, another left. Yeah, floor it and turn left. That is pretty much the instructions at Daytona and Indy, by the way. So there you go. 10th Man says that, in my opinion, prosecutors really just want a win. Do not really care about finding truth. Can you elaborate on that? That's a good question. And I'm sorry, we're shifting gears here radically on the topics, but I agree with you that unfortunately many prosecutors simply are looking for wins rather than simply making sure that the right person gets prosecuted for a crime. And, whenever you see a prosecutor bragging about their win-loss ratio, there's a couple famous talking heads on cable. I'm not going to say their names, but I've seen people get on TV and go, when I was a prosecutor, I was 99-0. Well, that means either you're prosecuting all the slam dunks or you put some innocent people in jail, because there's no way on earth that 99 people in a row that got brought in front of you were all guilty. That's just not mathematically possible. So I'm always a little upset by that, because I have seen cases before where a prosecutor insisted on prosecuting something on a matter of principle as opposed to, what's the right thing to do here. So there you go. Bill Van Ram says, I have a friend in New Zealand that built a dragster with a RR fighter engine inside his house. He never finished it. I don't think he wanted to because it was going to be crazy dangerous. We'll get back to that. Michael Goodwin says, hey, you have to love Jeff Dunham, who says NASCAR is a sport that's easy to follow when you're hammered. Getting back to the most dangerous dragster. There was a time when people would build these show cars. If you go to the Autorama, for instance, they got cars that might not even drive, and people build these cars, and once in a while you see something. And I remember a while back that somebody built a V8 powered unicycle. That is, they took a unicycle and built this thing where it had one wheel and it had a V8 engine on it. And of course, to drive it would kill you, but it was a showpiece. There you go. Jacob West, how does the robot lady send you the audio clips for the outro? A bunch at one time or just a few? I like technical questions because I can answer them very easily. I'm not sure if anybody cares, but and by the way, there's a debate going on, and I apologize for not knowing, but somebody says between the Rolls-Royce and the Merlin, was one of them a V12 or a V16? And I apologize. I know I said V12, and I'm doubting myself because I think I made a mistake. But Jacob, she'll shoot or record 20 or 30 in one sitting, and then she sends them to me via the internet, and I download them all onto a thumb drive. So I've got a whole directory of them. And the tricky part is I have to remember which ones I've used and which ones I've not used. So yes, I'm Googling something while we talk. NCR Disabled Submarine Vet says, how does the lemon law work in Michigan? I got a used 2006 Scion that has the same repair 4 times. The problem you've got with the 2006 is the car's 14 years old, and the lemon law only applies to brand new vehicles. So if you bought it used this late, it's not going to help you at all. So let's type in, okay, and the Rolls-Royce Merlin is a British liquid-cooled V12 piston aero engine of 27 liters. So that's what I was referring to as the V12. And in case you're curious, my understanding is, and again, somebody who knows more than I am is going to correct me on this, but that engine was built by both Rolls-Royce and Allison. Allison's an American company. Rolls-Royce is a British company. And so during wartime, things like that happen. And so that's where it goes. Jason Johnson. I didn't like the robot lady at first, but now I'm sold. You know what's funny? And I will admit to you that I tend to worry about technical things. I know someone's going to complain and go, Steve, you put the Finnish license plate over there when it used to be over there. But when I first used her on the intro, I got tons of flack from people who hated it. And my gut reaction was to just kill it and get rid of it, get rid of the intro. And I thought to myself, wait a second, Steve, that used to be dead air. All you're asking people to do is listen to something before there used to be dead air. So what's the difference, right? So I thought, okay, people will get used to that. And then people came around. They said, you know something, it's no big deal, no big deal. And then when the whole controversy came up, whether she's a real person or not, that's when I said, okay, I've got to put something at the end where she says, I'm not a robot. And I put that there. And I honestly thought that it was going to be a one-off joke that a few people would hear and go, oh my gosh, that's funny, because she says, I'm not a robot. And then that snowballed to where it is now. And I don't know how many outros she's done for me, but it's got to be over 100. And people have asked me, and they say, Steve, does she write them? Do you send them to her? Does she watch the video? No. And I will admit to you that this is part of the joke. I send her some quotes. She finds some quotes on her own. I've had people send me quotes via email or comment on her videos. And I've told her specifically that she can record anything she thinks is funny. She sends them to me, and she's not seen the videos because the videos haven't been recorded yet. So they are random. And I do not make any effort to make what she says tie with the video. Once in a while, we've gotten lucky where she said something where somebody goes, oh my gosh, that's funny because she said something about, no, she didn't. Quite often, it's an absolute non sequitur. And somebody just said that. They said, Steve, by the way, you understand that a lot of what she says are non sequitur. Yes, I do. That's one of the reasons that I think it's funny. So at least it makes me laugh. So, and Chevy Mustang points out that saying I'm not a robot is exactly what a robot would say. And yes, of course. Wayne Jensen, love the robot lady. I used to skip the end of your videos, but now I wait for funny quotes. Dave K says they were V12. Merlin was during World War II. The engines were made by Packard, and a modified version was used in the P-51 Mustangs. Yeah, and one thing you have to remember about wartime is the companies in America will often be making things for the military. And so, like, for instance, Jeeps, okay? If you know the Jeep story, the idea for the Jeep itself was a company called Bantam. And Bantam made the prototype and brought it to the U.S. government and said, hey, here's a little vehicle you guys can, put 4 people in, drive it around, drop it from airplanes. 5 guys can pick it up. You can dismantle it in an hour, put it back together again, whatever. And the U.S. government said, this thing is great, but you guys can't build it. You haven't got enough manpower. And so next thing you know, it's being built by other companies, including Ford. You can find a Ford Jeep. Okay, they're out there, the F script and everything. And so, the idea of who's making what during a war, a lot of those lines get blurred. But anyways, wherever you go, there you are. Pete Giardini points out that's from Buckaroo Banzai, a movie that had some moments, but also kind of just, kind of sits there sometimes. And of course, it reminds you of Austin Powers as he enters the casino shortly after killing the guy in the men's room, number 2. And he sees a total stranger and he goes, there you are. And the guy goes, do I know you? And he goes, no, but there you are. Someone with a name I cannot pronounce out loud says, hey, Steve. Boycott Watch says the name Jeep came from the Flintstones. I don't believe that's true because I think Jeep predates the Flintstones. But I know several different explanations for where the origin of the word Jeep came from. But I don't want to get into that too much these days. SJIM owned a Ford Jeep years ago. It was so much fun. Very cool. I was coming back from up north, I think last summer. Stopped at a gas station, exit 212, of course, and the one on the west side of the road. And I pulled in, and at the pump next to me was a guy pulling a trailer. On the back was a flat-fendered Jeep that looked so cool. I mean, it was old, it was beaten, and I walked away. I said, excuse me, I've got to say hello to the guy who owns this vehicle. I said, I love this vehicle. I said, what's the story behind it? I forgot the year, but the guy goes, I bought it from a farmer. He had it in his fleet. He used it for years and years and years and years. It still runs. He goes, I take it, bring it up north, ride it around out in the woods and stuff. He goes, it's a blast. I forgot what he said he paid for it, but it's something where you're like, oh, I'd gladly pay that for something like this. I took pictures of it and sent them to David Tracy over at Jalopnik, because David Tracy loves his old Jeeps. And a couple of years ago, I met David Tracy up at the Woodward Dream Cruise, and he brought an old Jeep. I mean, David Tracy was an engineer before he started writing for Jalopnik. I mean, he's still an engineer, but that was his profession. And he's one of these guys who's, a mechanic. He's got, 90-weight gear lube running through his veins. And he pulls up in the Jeep, and you can just tell. It's just no attempt to, it's not going to, he's not going to wax it. Okay. I mean, it's just, but it runs, So I sent him the pictures in that. Jay West, you ever consider getting a flat fender to replace the Deuce? I've considered getting an old Jeep. It's just one of those things I keep thinking like I should do that. Once in a while, I go onto eBay and I go down the rabbit hole and look at stuff, and I've seen it before. In fact, I saw a guy who was advertising one, but it was in California. And the problem is that you got to, I don't want to buy anything sight unseen. I have to violate my own rules to do that. But if somebody near me had one, I would consider it. I saw one pulled over by the side of the road with a for sale sign on the window, on somebody's property. I got out and looked at it, and I walked up and looked inside, and the dashboard had been in and out of this thing so many times. There were wires and just bundles of stuff hanging out from behind it. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a nightmare. Because the good news about something like that is they're so simple. But the bad news is that if someone gets in there and really screws things up, it might take a while to fix that. So, yeah, and Boycott Watch says, correction on Jeep. Wikipedia says Eugene the Jeep is a character in the Popeye comic strip. And that's the one I've heard, is that it was a character in Popeye who could appear anywhere or something to that effect. And so the idea was the Jeep can go anywhere, and they adopted that name, but obviously adopted it. It had to be something that existed as far back as World War II when Jeeps came out. Bill Van Ram says M1 rifles are made from many companies. Oh, yeah. Many. In fact, I got to tell you, Betsy here was made by a company. I can't read without my magnifying glass, but same thing there. Those swords were made by many manufacturers, and in the North and in the South. And so if you are a sword collector, they will know, like, oh, you got one of the common ones. These guys made 100,000 of these. Or, oh, you got a rare one. They only made a couple hundred of these. And I mean, it gets down to that kind of detail. So, the Gamma Goat, Tigerman 99515. I think I know what you're talking about. It's almost like a little flatbed, almost like a trailer that you pull behind something, except that it's got the steering wheel on it and a really primitive suspension, but they'll go almost anywhere. You can find a bunch of very cool military stuff out there. And for a while, I subscribed to the magazine put up by the Military Vehicle Owners Association. I forgot what the exact acronym is, but they put out a magazine. In the back, they had classifieds. And they'd actually have the classifieds broken down, not by make or model, but by capacity. 3/4 ton, 1 ton, 1.5, 2.5 ton, whatever. And so, like, for instance, the Deuce and a half right there would be in the same category as a Duck, because they're both 2.5 ton vehicles in their capacity ratings. And so I remember flipping through those, but you'd often see really well restored ones. And I don't want to drop $25,000 on some really nicely restored Jeep. If I got one, I'd want to be able to drive it and bounce it around a little bit and not feel bad taking it off road. So Joe Pella, I hated those Gamma Goats when I was in the 82nd. I have told people, Jerry C., what would a sword like that cost? You can pick one of these up for about $300 or $400. Go online, you can find dealers who sell these. They're not that uncommon. That's, I'm going to say that right now. But the man who mentions the Goat, I have to tell you that when I bought my M35 and I had it for a few years, I had a couple friends who recoiled in horror. I said, hey, I bought a Deuce and a half. And I had a couple friends I knew had done time in the service. And one of my friends goes, why would you get one of those? And I go, what do you mean? I go, it's cool. You should come over. I'll let you drive it. And he goes, oh, wait a second. I just realized, because I've never driven one. And I said, what were you thinking? He goes, I spent so much time in the back of those things, I hated them. He goes, I was always being carried around like I was the cargo. And I'm like, no. I go, it's a toy. I go, come on, I'll let you drive it, And I had another friend of mine, and he goes, Steve, you know how the tailgate works, right? And on the M35, the tailgate just flops. There's nothing. I mean, there's hooks at the top. You pull them out and drop it. It'll come down and slam, and it's heavy. And then it's got little hooks in the bottom. You can put your feet in and step up into the back. And my friend Jim told me that he was in the military, and they backed one of those up to something. And he said he had his hand on the surface, and another guy unclipped the gate, and he said he pulled it out just in time as the gate goes wham. And he's like, I could just, to this day, feel all the bones in my hand breaking, watching what would have happened if I hadn't moved my hand out from underneath that. But the cool thing about the military vehicles, and you look at the bed on the M35, it's just big slabs of metal. I mean, like when you look at the body lines on a car, I'm going to use my Tucker as an example. When you look at all the different body lines, like this body line right here, and it goes up like this, or the nose of the car, for instance, you see that it goes in here and then back out here, then in here and then back out here. And many people don't notice when I show them. I say, by the way, you understand that this appears to be one piece of metal all the way across to here, right? You see that. And they couldn't stamp that out in a single stamp, at least not then. So what they would do is they'd actually stamp this one piece, and they'd have to weld it all together and grind the welds down. But that's a lot of work to pretty up a car. And our military has got no use for pretty cars. I apologize, that's probably not straight. I'll fix that later. And so the M35's tailgate is just a slab of metal with a hinge and two hooks. That's it. Down the sides, from the inside, just straight slabs of metal. And now there are little brackets and so on. And the hood is basically just one piece of curved metal. It might have a little tiny thing in the front, but everything is designed for just ease of manufacture, ease of replacement or maintenance. And it's just, simplify all those processes. We don't need to build good looking trucks. We need to build a ton of trucks, a pile of them. So JP Boylo, MacGyver at large, payload and towing capacity. Somebody asked about probably why it's called a 2.5 ton truck. My understanding is a deuce and a half called a 2.5 ton truck. Deuce and a half, 2.5. 2.5 ton is the off-road capacity. And the on-road capacity generally is considered to be double the off-road capacity. So a 2.5 ton truck was rated that way so that you could put 2.5 tons of payload in it and drive it off-road and get it to where you wanted to go with it. And if it was on-road, you could put 5 tons into it as long as you didn't go off-road. So my deuce and a half was kind of like this one. It had wooden racks on the side that flopped down into benches, and it was called a troop carrier. And primary purpose of it was simply to transport troops. You could fit probably 12 guys back there with all their luggage. I know it's not called luggage in the military, but you'd sit on that and put the stuff in front of you. So if you watch these, and there's often be a big tarp over the top, but I didn't have that on mine. If you looked inside, there'd be a row of faces, helmets, and in the middle would be all their stuff. So there you go. JBG Travels, which metal detector do you like the most? I've got a White's V3i. Used to have a White's DFX. I've used White's electronics metal detectors my entire adult life. Found a lot of cool stuff with them. I've done videos on them. And check that out. The video I put up when I crossed 100,000 subscribers is the video where I described finding the $16,000 belt buckle. If you have not seen that video, I strongly recommend it. It's got nothing to do with the law, but it's a true story about how I found a $16,000 belt buckle. Robert Klein, I learned to drive a manual transmission in a 2.5 ton at Fort Stewart. That must have been an experience. It's not that difficult of a thing to drive. I learned to drive a manual transmission driving a tow truck. And the tow truck I drove had a really sloppy clutch. That was a bitch. Can I say that word? The only thing about the 2.5 ton truck, of course, is the first gear is a creeper. So you can pretty much just jam it in and you're not going to stall the engine out. But you got to, learn the shifting pattern. It's a pretty big pattern as I recall. You're doing a lot of this, but it's more just learning to drive a clutch while in such an uncomfortable vehicle, because the vehicle had the worst seats. Those seats were not designed for comfort. So someone asked, any metal detecting stories, Betty Anderson? No, it's winter in Michigan. So when the ground is frozen, you can't detect. So I can't get out until the spring. So probably May, late April if it's warm, but May before I can actually count on doing any metal detecting. Tigerman 99515. No, I've never metal detected outside of Michigan for the most part. Kayvon Green says, what is the meaning to life? And I suspect he is reacting to the title of the video, Live, the Universe, and Everything. That, of course, is the title to a Douglas Adams book, Following the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There was the restaurant at the end of the universe, and then there's Life, the Universe, and Everything. So I changed one letter. So Jason Johnson, you have such a mellow audience. No spam in politics. Thank you. So yeah, I like that. I try very, very hard. I've had people ask political questions here and elsewhere. I try not to get into that too much. No one's going to change their mind. Somebody says they learned to drive a manual with a 3 on the tree. And I'm going to tell you right now, I have to admit there's gaps in my knowledge. I've never driven a vehicle with a shifter up here, a manual. My family had one. When I was a little kid, my family had a station wagon. We had 2 of them that had shifters on the tree, on the column. And I never have. I've had, I don't know, 8 or 9 cars with manual transmissions, and they're always down here, 4 speeds or 5 speeds. But never driven one up here. So it's one of those, I'm assuming I could do it because I can work the clutch. The clutch is the hard part, right? So, Jason Johnson, I appreciate no spam and political stuff. That's all. There you go. Jay Klein, wouldn't the universe include everything? You would think so. But if you haven't read the books, you might not know this, but if you have, it's been a while. Life, the Universe, and Everything was a joke about the answer to everything. And the author is trying to get across the idea that Everyone wants to know what the answers are to life, the universe, everything. And so that was the catch-all throw in to get you to understand that he's talking about everything as opposed to just everything. If that makes sense. By the way, the answer is 42. So Jerry C. points out the metal spikes were painted the same color as the deuce and a half. You know, that's a theory that some people are working on. And several people are agreeing that the answer is, in fact, 42. There you go. William Logan, thoughts about the 2019 and 2020 F-150 oil consumption problems? Ford tried fixing by giving owners longer dipsticks. Really? I hadn't heard that. I'll take a look at that. If that's true, that's bizarre. Because that wouldn't solve the problem, obviously. Analog Designer, I still owe you a story on my attempt to buy one of the turbine engines for Joe Granatelli used in the 68 Indy 500. Have you read the book? They call me Mr. 500. No, I have not read the book. I'll have to take a look at that. But yeah, if you've got a story to tell me about turbine engines, feel free to pass it along. I wrote a book about the Chrysler turbine cars, and I actually wrote a book about the whole program. That's just one of the cars they built. Chrysler built probably 75, maybe 78 different cars that had turbine engines in them. 55 of them looked like that for the most part. One was white. It started in 53, ended in 83, but the program ran until 88. And many people know that GM experimented with turbine cars, and so did Ford. And they also experimented with them at the Indy 500. And turbine ran 2 years at Indy, and they both ran into mechanical problems that were not turbine related. But turbines would actually work well in a race like that, where they got to run at high speeds for the most part for a long, long time. They wouldn't do as well in races where there's a lot more of speeding up and slowing down. It's the steady state you want to run it at that makes the turbine more agreeable to the racing style. Sub-GR 42 is the wrong answer, by the way. Well, no, it's not the wrong answer. It's the correct answer. The question was, what's the question, as I recall? Matt Sanchez, why do diesel engines last longer than regular engines? You know, I've often wondered about that, if it's actually something inherently better about diesel engines, or if it's simply that they're built to higher standards because they're often used in heavier duty uses. I know that a lot of long haul trucks will have a diesel engine that'll last, 500,000 or 1 million miles, but they also build them from the factory to run that long, so I can find you some bad examples of diesel engines put in cars by the big three back in the 70s. And you might wonder about that durability thing. MacGyver at Large, turbine cars, talk to Jay Leno. I have. In fact, Jay wrote the intro to my book on turbine cars. And for the three of you in the audience who don't know this, if you go onto YouTube and type in Jay Leno's garage and turbine, you'll find a video that he shot about his turbine car where he interviews me about my book, and then hilarity ensues. So there you go. Vernon Turner points out some deep thought. Yes, that's the name of the computer that's working on all of this. Jason Johnson says diesels are just stronger built. That's what I'm thinking. That's probably it. My Deuce and a Half had a multi-fuel engine in it, but I primarily ran it on diesel. And it was a straight six, monstrous displacement. Didn't put out a whole lot of horsepower, but it put out a lot of torque. So, JP also says higher compression in diesel engines, so the tolerances are tighter and they're built better. So, yeah, MacGyver Large's long haul is considered light duty. Off-road is considered severe duty when it comes to diesels. And yeah, that makes sense, because if you think about it, when a long haul truck has got 500,000 miles on it, most of them are highway miles. And, I tell people that I had the one Ford Explorer that I put 238,000 miles on, and I'd say 98% of them were highway miles. I at the time lived very, very far from my office, and I commuted back and forth. It was an insane amount of commuting. And it adds up, but it adds up on the odometer, but it wasn't wearing out stuff. So, that had the original water pump and the original starter and all kinds of stuff. When I sold it at 238, it was still running, but it was such light duty use. I'd only had it off road once or twice. And even then I was on trails. I never took a boonie bouncing or anything. So That's what we call it here in Michigan for some odd reason. William Robinson says the Vogons came up with civil asset forfeiture. Yes, and they also came up with some of the worst poetry in the universe, as I recall. Aaron H., what's a turbine car? And it's kind of funny because there is a debate often raised whenever I say the word turbine. Turbine is spelled Turbine, and it's pronounced in some parts of the world as turbine. But in America, it's most commonly pronounced turbine. And I went with the turbine pronunciation myself because every single person I interviewed who worked on turbine cars called them turbines. I never met an American who said turbine. And I have people say, well, Steve, it's obviously turbine, Bine. And I say, in that case, it would be a turbine engine, Gine. So if you look in the dictionary, most dictionaries will actually say alternate pronunciations, take your pick. 10th man, Steve Leto, can I please ask you one last question? Do you support the 1A auditing community? It depends on what you consider auditing, because I have no problem with somebody who takes a camera out and films something happening outdoors, okay? So the police are beating some guy by the side of the road, film it. If the police come after you for filming that, they're wrong, okay? They shouldn't do it if they don't want to get filmed doing it. The problem I have is I've seen guys bring cameras into a building and start filming some woman at her desk. And the woman's like, what are you doing? I'm auditing you. Well, I'm just working. Why are you filming me? I'm auditing you. And they're doing it because they want to cause trouble. So I generally don't like people who cause trouble for the sake of causing trouble. But I do agree that we've learned a lot of interesting things lately because things got filmed that in the old days wouldn't get filmed. And it's amazing all the different parts of the universe that this touches. I read a very, very good article this morning. I think in Popular Science, believe it or not, about a guy who's a statistician who started studying marathon races and started exposing cheaters. Because so many people cheat in marathons, it's unfortunate. And I don't know why you'd enter a race and cheat when you don't win anything, because both of it, what do you get if you cheat but don't win? I mean, I don't even understand the concept. But some people do it just to get bragging rights. And so this guy goes through and he catches people cheating. And it's easy to do because you can simply look at the split times in a race. And somebody who runs 9-minute miles through most of the race and suddenly starts knocking off 3-minute miles, it's impossible. It's physically impossible. So they're cheating. But one of the things that helps improve his case is now there are so many cameras, not just race cameras, but other people's cameras. And digital photography is everywhere. And so he had cases before where he found somebody who he was convinced was cheating, but he couldn't actually prove it, except that somebody said, oh, here's an archive of like thousands of race photos. And he had a computer program that would put them all in order, sort them all through, and he could actually prove that this guy's race time would show him at these different spots like this, but he was in the wrong spots in between the race mats. Very, very interesting thing how they figured all this stuff out. And it's scary on the one hand that there's so much stuff out there and data being gathered on every aspect of our lives, but it's also very useful in situations like that where this guy was cheating, he got caught and got disqualified for doing that. So I read the article fascinated because not just of the topic, but also because they were talking about marathons, and I like talking about marathons. So Donald Norby says the Daytona 500 is about to start. Well, I'm about to end. Give me about 15 more minutes here. So I won't blame anybody who steps out, though, and says, hey, I got to watch the race. MH08, I do 20-minute miles. That's about walking pace. That's not bad. Yeah, it's you're not racing anybody. Okay, you're out there having fun. Richard Benjamin, they pronounce it turbine in the aircraft industry. I'm not sure who you're talking to. I've got friends in aircraft industry who say turbine, including people who work at companies that make turbine engines. So, yeah, the story about the yellow lab, Chevy Mustang. that got loose and ran a 16-mile race and came in fourth was funny. Yeah, every now and then you'll see that where somebody's dog gets loose and decides to go for a run, and it runs along with the runners and finishes. I also saw a story about a kid, like a teenage kid or a high school age kid, who entered what he thought was either a 5K or a 10K, and he took the wrong turn. And a lot of courses or races will have a course where everyone starts at the same spot, and halfway through there's a split. And the short race comes back like this, and the long race goes out like this, and it comes back. And he accidentally went the wrong way, and he wound up running the longer race. And his mom got worried because he didn't show up when he should have. And she's going, oh, it's a 10K race. You should be here by now. And a little while later, he crosses the finish line, and he finished like third or fourth in the long race, which he hadn't trained for, wasn't planning on running, and ran by accident. So it's fascinating. I can tell you that every year at the Free Press Marathon, at the half marathon mark, at 13 miles, there's a split in the course. And they go half marathon to the right, full marathon to the left. And you don't know how tempting it is to peel off and just go finish, and you just get it over with. The problem is, of course, you get disqualified because you're entered in the longer race. And you'd also feel stupid but you know, it's tempting though. When you're really tired and exhausted, your mind plays tricks on you. Somebody asked Jaguar or Jaguar, and that is an interesting question. The reason I say that is that for years, the television ads in America said Jaguar. And then they changed it to Jaguar. And I know that in England, they'll say Jaguar, but most Americans say Jaguar. But that's, I think, an American English thing. I can tell you, though, it bothers me when people say Porsche as a single syllable, because the man's name is Porsche. It's a two-syllable German name, Porsche. Okay? So I did have several people say, Steve, Porsche is a girl's name. Okay. So is Tiffany. But if I go and buy jewelry, I'm not buying it from a stripper. Okay. I'm buying it from a store called Tiffany's. There's a difference there. Okay. So Porsche is a man's name, and a car is a Porsche. And the idea that you'd buy something just to impress the ladies who aren't impressed and say, I got myself a Porsche. Okay. Sure. Why not? Robert Klein, the English have forgotten their own language. It belongs to us now. Well, we've taken it and molded it to our purposes. I think they're mortified when they see how we use their language, the King's English. How would a Superbird do against today's cars in the Daytona 500? What are the qualifying speeds? Like, what was the pole speed? I know they have different qualifiers, but like, what's the pole speed these days in NASCAR? Does anybody quickly fire that up for me? Because I can tell you right now that Mike the Mechanic, all your base are belong to us. You have to understand that in 1969, okay, Charlie Glotzback and a few other guys qualified at Talladega in the 198, 199 range. And they were doing, of course, as Paul Ryder points out, without restrictor plates. But those cars in 1969 could do 200 miles an hour. They could. In fact, Buddy Baker did a 200 mile an hour lap. Bobby Ice did a 201, both on Talladega. And so if the qualifying speeds these days are around 200 miles an hour, then a Superbird could run with them. Now, the only difference, of course, is that they're running restrictor plates on a very, very different engine. So you'd have to let the Hemis, the Dodge Daytonas run with Hemis, or Superbirds run with Hemis. And if they were running with Hemis unrestricted, they could keep up with modern cars. But the technology goes into modern cars. It's just in a different direction, how they've evolved over the years. The Hemi in that car, although it was built by Chrysler, was tuned by Harry Hyde. And, Harry Hyde was just a guy who, grew up in the industry and taught himself to tune cars, tune engines. And, guy was a genius. But I suspect nowadays, Hendrick Motorsports has a staff of guys who make more in a weekend than Harry Hyde made his entire career. And they've also probably got more engineers and PhDs on staff than, most college, engineering programs do. So it's a different thing. But if you wanted to run those things side by side, like I said, a Hemi-powered Daytona or Superbird, modern NASCAR, they could run side by side all day long. So Bill Elliott owns the closed lap record at Talladega around 220, I believe. I think it's in the teens. I could be wrong on that, like 217, 218. And they brought the speeds back down again a little while later. 10th man, dude, got to say, wish I was more like you. I'm very unlikable. You have a very fun attitude, just making sure you see what I'm saying. Hey, thanks for joining the fun. And thanks for checking in. I appreciate it. Donald Norby, 198. You got to remember, Bobby Isaac took that car, the full-size one, to the Bonneville Salt Flats and ran a 217, 216 stock-bodied car with a Hemi in it, straight line Bonneville, 216 and change. And that's a startling thing to have accomplished in 1971. Yeah, that's a long time ago. Brian Christensen, what is a restrictor plate? In the old days, you could run a 4-barrel carburetor on an engine as long as a stock engine. Chrysler had the Hemi, the 426, and then Ford and when GM ran, they had engines roughly that size. And in an attempt to handicap the cars so that the cars would all be equal, the people who ran NASCAR said, we're going to take a plate, an aluminum plate, and drill holes in it. And the cars that are running too fast will get smaller holes, and the cars that are running okay will get bigger holes. And by putting the restrictor plate between the carburetor and the intake manifold, it would in essence choke, not the same way you choke a car, but it would in essence, restrict how much, or actually throttle, using the verb throttle. It would throttle how much was coming through the intake manifold. And so they would play with the types of plates, and they were trying to level the playing field because everyone knew, for instance, that General Motors couldn't compete in 1970. They didn't even sponsor racing because they couldn't. They didn't have a team because their engines couldn't keep up. And so Bill France went to the car makers and said, look, guys, here's what I'm going to do. If someone's got engines that are outclassing other people, we'll just restrictor plate them down to where everyone's going to have equal output from their engines, try to level the playing field. And then what's funny is they brought restrictor plate racing in basically in, I think, 70 or 71. And they only do it at the super speedways for the most part, restrictor plate races. And the funny thing is that there were guys who were engine tuners who would figure out how to retune the engine to get not physically around the restrictor plate, but get around what it was doing. And they actually found that they could rejet the carburetors or play with the timing or something. And they could do things to kind of tweak around the handicapping of the restrictor plates. But restrictor plates are of the devil, as far as I'm concerned. So there you go. Trifingers summarizes it restricts air, CFM, cubic feet per minute, into the engine. If you can't get it in, you won't put it out. And of course, that's exactly right. Because Paul Ryder says gas engines are just air pumps. And, that's true. You're spraying gas with a whole bunch of air into the intake manifolds, goes into the pistons, gets compressed and explodes. And by choking down those intakes, you're going to limit what can get in there and so on. So very, very simple explanation from a guy who's not an engineer, but I think average person will get that. This year's pole sitting average speed was 194.582. 194. Yeah, and that's a Charger Daytona was beating that back in 1970, 69, 70. Sharon Martin, Batman or Superman? That's an interesting question because the Superman movies were horrible. Horrible. The Batman movies were better. When I was growing up, though, I actually collected both Batman and Superman comic books. And of course, the real debate was DC or Marvel, right? Because Marvel had Spider-Man, the Avengers, and all that stuff. But I was the Superman, Batman, and my brother had all the Spider-Man and Daredevil and a couple others that he collected. So Eleanor's restrictor plates. What a communist thing to do! You are that. I've never seen that connection made before, and I'm surprised that no one has said that to get them to stop talking about restrictor plates. They're communist. Karl Marx would approve. Mike Gertz, restrictor plates are of the devil. Have Heather do that as the outro. I have to. Roxanne, are any of your family members lawyers? No, strangely enough, no. I've got a bunch of relatives and so on that were teachers, a lot of teachers. And I'm not related to any lawyers. So it's funny that I became one. I've got a bunch of friends, including some friends I knew before they became lawyers. I've mentioned that before, but I kind of went there on my own as far as my family goes. Godzilla or King Kong? King Kong's got some history to him, but Godzilla, of course, it depends on which iteration of Godzilla we're talking about. But Godzilla's actually got kind of a cool backstory. The nuclear testing goes awry, and next thing you know, this gigantic lizard comes out to stomp on Tokyo or New York City, take your pick. So Kirk or Picard? Yeah, we'll do a lightning round now. And I believe the Big Bang Theory was joking about this. Depends on what you're looking at. But Picard, of course, wins on every single category, except that Captain Kirk somehow gets points for being just so cheesy. There's just something about his overacting, and I don't know. You look at how low budget some of those early Star Treks are, like where they're on a planet where there's nothing. And they did that because they couldn't afford props, okay? Guys, we need to shoot an episode, but we have no money for, no budget for props. Oh, let's go to a planet where there's nothing. Okay, there you go. Melanie Thomas, Godzilla is King Kong on the grind. Or the crank. Godzilla has the song. I actually thought of that, but I don't sing. Michael Goodwin, left Twix or right Twix? See, you realize that that's a hoax being perpetrated on the American public. I watch TV commercials now, and the only thing dumber than insurance commercials are Twix commercials. But you know something? We're talking about Twix, so maybe that's good. Kirk is a better singer if you consider what he's doing singing, 10th Man. 10th Man points out that Kirk, I think even Leonard Nimoy may have put out an album at one time or another too. But Kirk kind of like talked. He talked along with records. And it ain't pretty. I think you can find it on YouTube, but it was always an amusing thing to hear at least once. Richard Benjamin asks if Picard ever went off half-kirked. Michael Clark, Siskel or Ebert? Gene Siskel, who I believe is the one who's no longer with us. I never cared for Ebert because Ebert gave my favorite movie of all time, The Prestige, a bad review. And we'll talk about that somewhere down the road, but not now. We haven't got time. I'm going to get wound up. Sharon Martin, U of M or MSU? I tend to be a U of M supporter, although MSU's got its things. It depends. I was a big fan of like the Fab Five at U of M basketball. And then unfortunately they had that controversy where they basically got all their wins taken away from them and so on. But, for a few years there, they were rocking it. And I've always been a supporter of U of M football. But I know a lot of people who've gone to Michigan State, and it's a very, very good school. So what are you going to do? Chevy Mustang, the communicator became a flip phone. Yeah. And the tricorder. It would make the noise, and it'll tell you anything you wanted to know, much like the internet. So there you go. Jason Johnson, go blue. MH08, I watched The Prestige. Sorry, meh. Dude, you don't understand a good movie. Watch it again. And again and again. I've seen that movie. I'm not making this up. I've seen that movie probably 50 times, front to back. I've read the book. The book is good. The movie is good. And the movie was made by Christopher Nolan, who's the guy who did Memento. And Christopher Nolan's made a bunch of good movies. I think he's also done some later Batman-ish type movies. But The Prestige is one of those rare movies where the book is good. To make it work as a movie, they had to change it, but the changes don't make it any worse. We've all seen movies where they changed the ending, for instance, for Hollywood, like The Natural. I got news for you, but in The Natural, in the story, it doesn't have a happy ending. Only in the movie is there a happy ending. And The Prestige, they made it fit on screen and they made it work. So if you haven't seen it, see it. If you've seen it and disagree with me, you're wrong. Sandfire 7. Hey, Steve, love your show from Tennessee. Thanks for checking in. I love Tennessee as well. Driven through it a few times, visited a few times, Memphis in particular. But Tryfinger says it's hard to say goodbye, but it's time for you to fly. And yes, it is. It is 2:30, halfway down in my glass of QAnon Adventure Company Gatorade. But we're going to log off at this moment. Daytona 500 is on. Go check that out. Have yourself a good Sunday. I'll be back next Sunday. As always, same time, same place, same bat channel. Behave yourself. Bye-bye.